The void between stars was supposed to be empty. For Captain Ji-hoon of the CSS Endeavour, it usually was. His ship was a creature of function, not form a bulky, angular mass of gray metal, covered in the scars of its own construction. New sensor arrays stuck out like blisters. Armor plates were welded over old ones in a haphazard quilt. It was a ship built by engineers who valued efficiency over elegance, and it hummed with the sound of a dozen systems working just a little too hard. They were testing the new drive. The Q-32. Chief Engineer Su Min had called it a controlled leap into the theoretical. She stood on the command deck now, her hands flying over a console, her eyes fixed on the cascading data. Energy matrix is stable, at least as stable as it gets. Ready for the microjump on your mark, Captain. Ji-hoon nodded, a calm, slow gesture. Proceed, Su Min. Take us to the Proxima Centauri rally point. A 10-light-year hop, initiating jump sequence. Su Min's voice was all business. The Q-32 drive whined, a pitch that vibrated in the teeth. The stars on the main viewer stretched into lines, and then everything went wrong. The sound wasn't a bang, but a sickening, deep tear, as if reality itself had ripped. Alarms shrieked. The Endeavour tumbled violently out of the warp bubble, emergency gravity straining to keep the crew in their chairs. Lights flickered, and the distinct smell of burnt ozone filled the air. Report. Ji-hoon's voice cut through the chaos. Steady Su-min was already buried in diagnostics, her face lit by angry red error messages. Navigational failure. Catastrophic. The Q-32 didn't jump. It bored. We've been thrown completely off the charts. I have no idea where we are. Xenobiologist Tae-seok, who had been monitoring some plant samples, picked himself off the floor, a cheerful smile on his face despite the situation. Well, that was exciting. I don't recognize any of these stellar constellations. Not even a little bit. Communications Officer Yuna worked her panel, her brow furrowed. Background radiation is strange, too clean, and I'm picking up structured signals. A lot of them. This isn't empty space. Before Ji-hoon could respond, the space on the viewer shimmered. 6 ships resolved into view, their arrival smooth and silent. They were like nothing human eyes had ever seen. Sleek, golden-hulled vessels shaped like elegant daggers, covered in intricate glowing patterns that pulsed with soft light. They moved in perfect synchronized formation, surrounding the battered Endeavour without a single wasted motion. A low whistle came from the tactical station. Weapons are powering up, Captain. Energy signatures are massive. They've got a lock. Ji-hoon studied the beautiful, deadly ships. He noted the precise spacing, the textbook-perfect encirclement. They're following a standard containment protocol. Predictable. Hold all weapons at standby. Do not power anything aggressive. Yuna, they're going to hail us. Let's hear it. As if on cue, the main viewer shifted. The face that appeared was regal and severe, with sharp features and skin that held a faint silver sheen. He wore a uniform of gleaming white and gold, with intricate epaulets. The background was a grand command bridge, silent and spotless. Unidentified vessel, the figure said, his voice deep and layered with clear, translated tones. You have violated the sovereign space of the Illyrian Empire. You trespass in the Celeban Gulf, a domain sacred to the Imperial Fleet. I am Admiral Kalen Vor of the 3rd Border Fleet. By the authority of the Eternal Throne, you are commanded to surrender your vessel immediately. Prepare for boarding and inspection. Resistance will be met with total annihilation. The message ended. On the Endeavour's deck, the crew looked at each other. There was no fear. There was, if anything, a sense of profound annoyance. Yuna turned in her chair. Linguistic analysis complete. The language is highly formal, hierarchical. That wasn't just a greeting. It was a recited legal and cultural statement, full of assumed superiority. Tae-seok leaned in. The Admiral's species. Impressive bioluminescent signaling in the skin, probably tied to emotional state. Right now, it's pulsing a steady gold. He expects awe. Su-min grunted, not looking up from her repairs. He's going to be disappointed. Our warp core is leaking theta radiation. I need to shut it down and patch it, not deal with a fancy welcome party. Ji-hoon steepled his fingers. He looked at the frozen image of the proud admiral, then at his own scuffed, functional command deck. He thought of the mountain of paperwork an interstellar incident would create. Yuna, open a channel. Audio only. Let's keep them guessing for a moment. When the light indicated the link was open, Ji-hoon spoke. His tone was that of a man dealing with a minor bureaucratic hiccup, polite, slightly weary, utterly devoid of ceremony. Admiral VOR, this is Captain Ji-hoon of the human exploration vessel Endeavour. Please excuse our unexpected arrival. We've experienced a significant navigational error. Our astral charts seem to be malfunctioning. We mean no intrusion and request coordinates to the nearest neutral space so we can effect repairs. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship Resplendent, the silence was absolute. Admiral VOR blinked. He had delivered the grand proclamation of sovereignty. He had expected cries of mercy, or at least stunned silence. He had never received a dry, apologetic explanation about faulty charts. The human's voice sounded like that of a minor functionary reporting a clerical error. His second-in-command leaned over. Their vessel. Scans show primitive construction. Patchwork alloys. Their power signature is erratic. But their communication, it is clear, and they are not begging. VOR's jaw tightened. It is a trick. A show of false bravery. Respond with visual. Back on the Endeavour, the hail came again. This time, Ji-hoon nodded to Yuna. Put him on. Let's see his face. Admiral VOR's image reappeared, his silver face now set in stern lines. Your explanation is noted, but insufficient. Your vessel's design is irregular. You will comply with surrender protocols. A delegation will board you to determine your origin and intent. Ji-hoon looked directly at the viewer. He could see the immaculate gilded bridge behind the admiral. He thought of Su-min in her grease-stained coveralls and of the leaking coolant line in Corridor 4. Admiral, we are currently managing a drive containment leak. A boarding party is acceptable for a preliminary survey, but I must insist your people follow our safety protocols. Our environment is technically hazardous in several compartments. We would not want any accidents. He said it with the sincere concern of a project manager warning visitors about a wet floor. To VOR, it sounded like a veiled threat. What kind of species casually declared their own ship a hazardous environment? Your concerns are noted, VOR said, his rhythm broken. The Imperial delegation will arrive shortly. Do not deviate from your position. The screen went dark. On the Endeavour, Ji-hoon let out a small sigh. All right. Su-min, do your best to clean up the major radiation leaks. Tae-seok Yuna with me. Let's receive our guests. Remember, they're probably used to people being impressed. Let's just be professional. As they moved to the main airlock corridor, Yuna glanced at Ji-hoon. You didn't thank him for his gracious welcome this time. Ji-hoon allowed himself a small, tired smile. He seemed like the type who'd think I was making fun of him. Which, to be fair, I would be. The Imperial shuttle was a piece of art, small and golden, docking with a whisper. The airlock of the Endeavour, in contrast, was a vault door of scarred metal, hissing and groaning as it cycled. When the inner door opened, 6 Imperial soldiers stood there. They were tall, clad in ornate armor of white and gold that gleamed under the ship's harsh white utility lights. They held energy pikes that hummed softly. Their helmets were sculpted into stern, noble faces. They looked like statues come to life, and they froze for a second, taking in the sight before them. The corridor was all gray metal, exposed piping, and bundles of cables strapped to the walls. The air was cool and carried the smells of machine oil, ozone, and recycled air. A crew member in a simple blue jumpsuit walked past, carrying a diagnostic tablet, giving the glittering soldiers a brief. Curious glance before turning a corner. Captain Ji-hoon stood before them, dressed in a plain dark uniform with simple insignia. Admiral's delegation, welcome aboard the Endeavour. I'm Captain Ji-hoon. Please watch your step. The gravity plating is uneven past bulkhead 7. The lead soldier, his voice modulated by his helmet, tried to regain the script. You will take us to your command center for inspection. Of course. This way. Ji-hoon turned and led them. As they walked, they passed an open maintenance hatch. Inside, Chief Engineer Soo-min was half buried in a console, a large, grimy wrench in her hand. She pulled herself out, nodded at the procession of armored giants, and without a word, used the wrench to give a protruding conduit a solid, ringing thwack. It sealed with a hiss. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of grease, and went back to work. The Imperial soldiers stared. They had never seen a tool used with such brutal, effective simplicity. They had never seen a chief engineer who looked like a mechanic. They entered the command deck. It was a hemisphere of functional consoles, every surface covered in screens, physical buttons, and handwritten notes on sticky pads. It was busy, lived in, and utterly without grandeur. Tae-seok approached one of the soldiers, his face friendly. Fascinating armor. The organic patterning in the chest plate. Is that a grown com? The Imperial soldiers stood in the middle of the human command deck, their gleaming armor and ornate pikes looking utterly out of place. The air hummed with the low, functional noise of machines. Not the solemn silence of an Imperial bridge. Captain Ji-hoon watched the lead soldier, whose name tag translated roughly as Decurion Aris. The man's silvery skin beneath his helmet was flickering with faint, confused patterns of blue and green. Tae-seok, the biologist, was watching the same thing with keen academic interest. Your command center is irregular, Decurion Aris stated, his voice tight. He was trying to regain control of a script that had already fallen apart. It's functional. Ji-hoon replied with a simple shrug. We prioritize access over aesthetics. Please conduct your scan. Yuna will assist with any data queries. Yuna gave a short, professional nod from her console, her fingers already tapping. On her screen, complex lines of basic code scrolled past, a patchwork of programming languages from different decades of human development. To an Imperial system looking for a unified, elegant data architecture, it would look like digital rubble. The Decurion gestured to 2 of his soldiers. They produced small, glowing orbs that floated from their hands. The orbs began to drift around the room, emitting soft pulses of light as they mapped and scanned every system. Soo-min, the engineer, looked up from a floor panel she was securing and tracked the orbs with a critical eye. Low-yield photonic resonant mappers. She muttered to Ji-hoon, just loud enough for him to hear. Efficient for standard tech. Won't penetrate the lead shielding in the lower decks, though. One of the orbs floated toward her. It pulsed, scanning the massive wrench on her tool belt. The orb's light stuttered, flashing a quick, confused yellow before moving on. It couldn't categorize the simple metal tool. Soo-min smirked. The scan of the command deck finished quickly. The orbs returned to the soldier's hands. Decurion Iris studied a small hologram that sprang from his wrist. His brow furrowed. The data was a mess. Power systems were layered in a chaotic redundancy. Weapon signatures were minimal, but the structural readings showed bizarre density in random places. Like the ship was a piece of fruit that had grown strange, hard lumps. Your vessel's design philosophy is non-standard, the Decurion said, choosing his words carefully. It's iterative, Sumain answered, standing up and wiping her hands on her already stained coveralls. We find a weak point. We head a plate. A system fails. We reroute through 3 older ones. She's ugly, but she holds. She said it with the pride of a parent describing a resilient child. The Decurion stared at her. He had never heard a chief officer speak of a starship in such a way. Admiral VOR requires a full inspection. You will provide a tour of your primary systems. Ji-hoon nodded. Of course. This way. Please stay close. Some of the passages are narrow. The tour was a study in contrasts. The humans moved with relaxed familiarity through their metal labyrinth. The Imperial soldiers, for all their training, moved stiffly, their wide shoulders and decorative armor often brushing against exposed cables or dripping pipes. They went to engineering first. The Imperial concept of an engineering bay was a serene, clean room with glowing power cores. The Endeavor, as main engineering, was a cacophonous cathedral of noise and heat. Massive, outdated fusion reactors thronged behind thick glass, patched in places with composite sealant. Steam hissed from a loose valve in a corner. The floor was a grid of metal, and beneath it they could see a tangle of moving parts and flashing lights. One of the soldiers stepped on a section of floor that gave a soft clang. Su Min held up a hand. Don't stand there. The vibration interferes with the alignment of the secondary coolant pump. Stand over here. She pointed to a spot stained with something dark. The soldier quickly moved. The Curie Iris watched a team of human engineers at work. They were communicating in short, technical bursts, arguing about tolerances and thermal loads. They used hand gestures and slapped consoles to make points. It was chaotic, urgent, and deeply cooperative. There was no hierarchy visible, only a shared goal of keeping the angry machines running. Your power core, the Decurion said, raising his voice over the din. It is unstable. The radiation shielding is minimal by Imperial standards. It is a hazard. Su Min nodded, as if he'd commented on the weather. It's a Mark IV fusion torch. It's supposed to be a little unstable. That's where the extra power comes from. The shielding is enough to keep the crew safe for about 10 years before cancer rates spike. We've only been out for 8. She said it as a simple fact, a trade-off every engineer on the ship understood. The soldiers exchanged glances. A 10-year cancer deadline was a casual workplace condition for these people. Next was the mess hall. It was a small, utilitarian room with metal tables bolted to the floor. The air smelled of recycled air and the faint, tangy scent of yeast from the protein vats. Ji-hoon offered the delegation a meal. You must be tired. It's not much, but it's calories. He placed several sealed pouches on the table and squeezed out a thick beige paste onto plates. It was standard nutrient paste, type 3, flavor, neutral. The humans sat and began eating with methodical efficiency. T-Seok took a bite and smiled. Good potassium levels today? The Imperial soldiers remained standing. Decurion Iris looked at the paste with poorly concealed horror. You? Consume this? Yuna looked up. It's efficient. All essential nutrients, long shelf life, minimal waste. You get used to the texture after a few months. She took another bite. On our ships, the Decurion said, his voice regaining a sliver of pride. We have synthesizers that can create any gourmet dish from 1,000 worlds. Eating is a refined art. Ji-hoon swallowed a mouthful. That sounds nice. For us, eating is a maintenance task. Saves time for other work. He wasn't being dismissive. He was stating a simple equation. One of the younger soldiers, perhaps trying to be polite or overcome his disgust, picked up a spoon. He took a tiny amount of the paste. The moment it touched his tongue, his face contorted. His silvery skin flashed a brilliant, mortified purple. He fought not to gag, swallowing with visible effort. The human crew watched, their expressions not offended, but mildly curious, as if observing a scientific reaction. T-EOK leaned forward. Fascinating. The bioluminescent response to a disagreeable taste is instantaneous and vivid. Is the purple hue tied to a specific digestive distress indicator, or is it a more general social signal of distaste? The young soldier just stared, his skin now pulsing embarrassed pink and purple. The Decurion shot Tae-seok a sharp look. The human was not mocking them. He was genuinely, academically fascinated by their disgust. It was somehow worse. The final stop was the medical bay. It was clean but crowded, packed with equipment from different eras, a sleek modern bone knitter next to a bulky, 20-year-old defibrillator. Xenobiologist Tae-seok also served as the acting medical officer. He cheerfully showed them the automated surgical suite. It's mostly automated, he explained. Can handle most trauma. Amputations, organ repair, cranial pressure relief. We had to use it last year when a pressure coupling failed in engineering. Works well, if you don't mind the noise. He patted the machine like it was a loyal. If loud, dogged out one of the soldiers, whose scans had shown a minor chronic joint inflammation from years of training in heavy armor. Was secretly hoping the humans might offer advanced medical aid. He gestured to a small handheld scanner. And this device? For diagnosis? Tae-seok picked it up. This is an old ultrasound imager. Mostly we use it to check for internal bleeding or to see if the hydroponics tomatoes have ripened. Not very precise. He tossed it back onto a tray with a clatter. The soldier's hope died. These people used a medical device to check on vegetables. As they returned to the command deck, the mood among the Imperial delegation had shifted. Their initial suspicion had turned into a deep, unsettled confusion. These humans were not primitive. Their technology, while ugly and patchwork, worked with a brutal, relentless efficiency. Their calm was not bravery. It was the practicality of people who spent their lives solving one concrete problem after another. They looked at imperial splendor and saw wasted energy. They looked at gourmet food and saw an inefficient waste of time. Back at the airlock, Decurion Eris turned to Ji-hoon. His earlier sternness was gone, replaced by a wary puzzlement. Your inspection is concluded for now. Admiral Vawar will review our findings. You are to remain here. Ji-hoon nodded. Understood. Tell the Admiral we are happy to cooperate. And if his engineers have suggestions for our warp core leak, we'd welcome the advice. We've tried a Chiramo metallic sealant and a polymer injection, but the theta radiation keeps breaking it down. The Decurion just stared. He was being given technical details of a failure as a parting gesture. He gave a stiff nod and led his soldiers back into their perfect golden shuttle. As the airlock sealed, Yuna let out a breath. Well, that was something. They think we're insane. Tae-seok was beaming. Did you see the skin frequency shifts? I cataloged 7 distinct emotional states. They are so expressive. Su-min was already heading back to engineering. They think our ship is a death trap. They're not entirely wrong. I need to fix that leak before their Admiral decides to blast us for being aesthetically offensive. Ji-hoon looked at the viewer, now showing the majestic Imperial fleet holding posit. The summons to the Imperial flagship was delivered not with a booming declaration, but with a simple, crisp data packet. Captain Ji-hoon was to present himself alone for a formal discourse with Admiral War. A shuttle would be provided. "It's an interrogation," Yuna stated, looking over the message on her screen. "The phrasing is all polite, but the subtext is explain yourself or else. They've analyzed our ship and found it confusing. Now they want to analyze you." Ji-hoon nodded, checking the fasteners on his simple uniform jacket. "That's fine. They ask questions, I give answers. Simple." Su Min crossed her arms. "Be careful. People who live in shiny places get nervous when they see rust. They might think the rust is contagious." Tae Seok offered a small, cheerful-looking device. "Here, a subcutaneous biomonitor. It will let us know if your stress levels spike or if they inject you with anything." Ji-hoon took the device, a tiny flat disc, and pressed it against the skin behind his ear. It stung for a second. Let's hope it's just for conversation. The Imperial shuttle was a silent, smooth ride. It docked with the Resplendent in a bay that looked more like a palace entrance hall than a hangar. The air was scented with something faint and floral. The light was soft and golden. Every surface was polished, every edge was graceful. Ensigns in immaculate uniforms moved with quiet, precise steps. Ji-hoon was met by 2 silent guards and led through sweeping corridors. He walked without gazing around in wonder. He noted the lack of visible conduits or access panels, the probably fragile materials, and the long distances between what he assumed were emergency stations. He filed it all away as operational data, not art. They entered a chamber that was not a brig, but a reception room. A wide window looked out onto the stars and the distant, lumpy shape of the Endeavor. In the center was a large, beautiful desk made of a swirling blue wood. Behind it sat Admiral Vor. At his side stood a female Illyrian in simpler, elegant robes, Scholar Ilara, her large eyes observing everything. "Captain Ji-hoon," Vor said, not rising. His voice was calm, authoritative. "Please sit." Ji-hoon sat in the offered chair. It was uncomfortable, designed for posture, not relaxation. "Your vessel is an oddity," Vor began, cutting to the chase. "My engineers are baffled. It is a collection of inelegant solutions. Yet your crew shows no fear. Your ship, while primitive, shows signs of extreme durability. I wish to understand the contradiction. Tell me of your homeworld, of humanity." Ji-hoon considered. He decided on technical truth. Earth is a Class 8 death world by our own classification. Gravity is 9.81 meters per second squared. Atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which is highly reactive and supports rampant combustion. 70% of the surface is covered in a corrosive saltwater solution we call an ocean. The tectonic plates are unstable, causing regular seismic events. The weather systems are volatile, capable of generating storms with winds over 300 kilometers per hour. He recited the facts in a flat, report-giving tone. Vor and Ilara listened, their faces impassive, but the subtle, jewel-like lights set into the walls of the room seemed to dim slightly. "Your species evolved in such an environment?" Ilara asked, her voice curious. "We did. The biosphere is aggressively competitive. A significant percentage of plant life produces complex neurotoxins for defense. Most animal life is omnivorous or carnivorous, with multiple redundant predatory adaptations. Much of the microbial life is parasitic." "A hellscape," Vor murmured, almost to himself. "It is home," Ji-hoon corrected mildly. "We are adapted. Our bones are dense. Our healing systems are robust. We can run for long distances. The challenges shaped our problem-solving approach." He said it as if describing a difficult but useful training course. "And your history?" VOR pressed, leaning forward. Such a world must breed conflict. Ji-hoon nodded. We have had conflicts. We have records of wars spanning our entire globe, using weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, biological. We have experienced societal collapses, pandemics, and resource wars. It is a part of our historical record. He was talking about the past, but he spoke of it with the detachment of a historian, not a survivor. VOR's eyes gleamed. He was getting somewhere. So, you are survivors of apocalypse. This explains your resilience, your disregard for comfort. Ji-hoon shook his head slightly. We are engineers. We learn from failure. After a conflict, we rebuild, often with better materials. But what of threats beyond your world? Scholar Elara interjected, her voice soft. You show no awe at the scale of the Empire. You act as if the cosmos holds no surprises. Why? Here, Ji-hoon made a small, strategic decision. He wanted to seem harmless, to frame humanity's nature in a way the Empire might understand as non-threatening. He thought of their love for stories and grandeur. We have imaginations, he said, offering a small, conciliatory smile. We tell stories. Our fiction, our made-up tales, they explore ideas, concepts we have never actually seen. VOR's interest was palpable. What concepts? Ji-hoon listed them, trying to sound theoretical, almost dismissive. Oh, thought experiments. Like self-replicating machine swarms that consume planets for raw material, or extra-dimensional entities that perceive our reality as a plaything, or the heat death of the universe and ways to reverse entropy. He waved a hand. Just stories. We use them to explore ethics, physics, to prepare for possibilities. The room became very cold. The lights dimmed further. Admiral VOR and Scholar Elara were not hearing speculative fiction. They were hearing a catalog of galactic-scale nightmares. The silent scourge of the Cygnus Veil was a self-replicating machine swarm from a forgotten age. The whisperers from the void were beings that twisted space-time. The heat death was the ultimate, unavoidable end that all Illyrian philosophy was designed to make peace with. To them, Ji-hoon was not describing fiction. He was casually referencing specific, universe-shattering horrors, as if they were common bedtime stories for human children. And he had said they used them to prepare. You? Prepare for these things? Elara asked, her voice barely a whisper. In a theoretical sense, Ji-hoon said, sensing he had stepped into a different kind of territory, but not understanding its shape. We run simulations, design hypothetical defenses. It is an intellectual exercise. It keeps our strategic thinkers sharp. He meant it like a chess problem. To VOR. It meant human military academies ran war games against scenarios the Empire considered Lovecraftian myths. The human's calmness was no longer just resilience. It was the terrifying stillness of a soldier who has trained against demons. And your ship? VOR said, his voice now heavy. Its design. The patchwork. The armor in seemingly random places. Is this a result of these theoretical preparations? Ji-hoon saw a way to explain the endeavor as ugliness. Yes, we call it adaptive design. We stress test systems to failure, then reinforce. We assume any environment will be hostile. We assume any system can and will break. So we build in layers. Redundancies upon redundancies. It is not elegant, but it is survivable. VOR leaned back, the blue wood of his chair creaking softly. He looked from Ji-hoon's plain, calm face to the ugly, robust ship floating in the viewport. The pieces clicked together in his mind, forming a picture of terrifying clarity. These were not primitive survivors. They were veterans of 1,000 imagined hells. Their world was a gladiator pit. Their history was a chronicle of self-inflicted apocalypses. And their minds were factories that mass-produced cosmic horrors for practice. Their lack of awe was not ignorance. It was the profound, soul-deep weariness of a people who had already stared into every possible abyss in their imaginations, and had built a patched-together ship just to be ready for any of them to become real. The Admiral had come seeking an explanation for their behavior. He had found one, far more profound and frightening than he had ever wanted. "You are dismissed, Captain Ji-hoon," Velar said, his voice suddenly tired. "Your shuttle will return you. We will consider our findings." Ji-hoon stood, giving a polite nod. "Thank you for your time, Admiral, Scholar. If you have further questions about our drive systems, my engineer Su-min has prepared a data packet on the theta radiation leakage. She welcomes peer review." He left the room, walking with the same steady pace. He had been honest, he thought. He had framed humanity as creative thinkers and hardy engineers. It seemed to have gone well enough. The monitor behind his ear hadn't even twitched. Back on the Endeavor, he reported to the crew. They asked about Earth and our history. I gave them the basic specs. They seemed a bit quiet by the end. Yuna frowned, looking at the data from his biomonitor. "Your vitals were flat the whole time. But their energy signatures on the flagship, they spiked wildly right after you mentioned our fiction." "What exactly did you tell them?" "Just some of the big concepts from old stories and simulations," Ji-hoon said, pouring himself a cup of water. "You know, von Neumann probes, extra-dimensional beings, that sort of thing. I said we used them for training." Su-min snorted. "You told the shiny, peaceful empire that we daydream about planet-eating robots and gods from beyond space? For fun?" "I said it was theoretical," Ji-hoon insisted. On the Resplendent, Scholar Elara turned to Admiral VOR, her face pale. "Admiral, they do not fear the dark. They have spent their entire history building a darker dark in their minds, just to learn how to face it. What do we do with such a species?" "ADM." The new course coordinates arrived with an Imperial escort. 4 of the Golden Dagger ships took up positions around the Endeavor, their movements crisp and ceremonial. "The Admiral extends his compliments," the communication from the flagship stated. "We will guide you through a stable stellar corridor to neutral space. Please follow our lead precisely. The region ahead, the Morgo Drift, contains minor gravitational anomalies and occasional ionic debris. Our formation will shield you." On the Endeavor S command deck, Yuna played back the message, her expression skeptical. "The phrasing is off. Minor anomalies. Occasional debris. It's downplaying something. The subvocal stress in the translation matrix suggests caution. They're nervous about this place." Captain Ji-hoon studied the tactical display. The Imperial ships had shifted into a tight diamond formation, putting the human vessel squarely in the center. "It's a protective box formation, but they've also positioned themselves to observe us from all sides. This isn't just an escort. It's a test." Su-min grunted from an engineering station. "The gravitational anomalies on the long-range scans look like wreckage fields. A lot of wreckage. This is a dangerous place." Tae-seok looked up from a sensor feed, his usual cheer tempered. "I'm reading sporadic biosigns out there. Not like the Illyrians. These are sharper, aggressive patterns. They're hiding in the debris." Ji-hoon nodded slowly. "They want to see how we handle a fight. All right, we didn't come looking for one, but we won't run from one either. Battle stations. Minimal readiness. Keep the energy signature low. Let's look like we're just following along." The small fleet moved into the drift. The space here was cluttered with the shattered remains of ships, some ancient, some newer. The debris was dark and jagged, turning the starfield into a treacherous maze. The Imperial ships moved with careful precision, their elegant forms weaving through the wreckage. For an hour, there was only silence and drifting metal. The tension on the Imperial bridge was a tangible thing, waiting for the inevitable. On the Endeavor, the crew worked quietly. Su Min diverted power from non-essential systems to the reinforced hull plating and the kinetic railgun batteries. The humans didn't look nervous. They looked focused, like mechanics preparing for a difficult repair job that it began without warning. From behind a vast, spinning hull plate, a swarm of ships erupted. They were the opposite of the Illyrian vessels, asymmetric, welded together from stolen parts and scrap, covered in jagged spikes and crude weapon knots. They moved in a screaming, chaotic rush, firing wild bursts of plasma and solid projectiles. The Morgul raiders, the Imperial escort, reacted instantly. Their golden hulls glowed as shields activated. They fired back with precise, bright lances of energy, trying to pick off the lead raiders. But the raiders were too many, and they fought with a feral, unpredictable frenzy. They swarmed like insects, focusing their fire on one of the Imperial ships at the edge of the formation. Its shield flared, straining under the barrage. On the Endeavor, alarms sounded. A plasma bolt sizzled past the viewport. "Shields at minimum," Su Min reported. "Just enough to stop micro-debris. Full shielding would drain our core in 3 minutes under this." "Understood," Ji-hoon said, his voice calm. "Evasive pattern Delta. Don't try to outrun them. Make us a hard target. Yuna broadcast on all frequencies. We are a non-combatant vessel. Cease fire." Yuna sent the message. It was met with a harsh laugh and a torrent of garbled threats over the comms. A raider ship, smaller and faster, broke from the swarm and dove straight for the Endeavor as main engines. "They're going for the drive," Tae-seok said. Watching the tactical screen, Ji-hoon didn't hesitate. "Su Min, cut power to rear thrusters on my mark. Let them think we're dead. Prepare forward starboard railgun." The raider ship closed in, its crude weapons glowing. At the last second, Ji-hoon said, "Mark." The Endeavor's engine glow died. The ship seemed to stall. The raider overshot, its pilot confused for a critical half-second. In that moment, the human ship rotated on its axis, a clumsy but effective maneuver. A massive magnetic railgun turret, hidden behind a retractable armor plate, slid out and locked on. Fire. The railgun didn't make a bright energy beam. It made a deep, metallic thump that vibrated through the entire hull. A solid tungsten slug, the size of a ground car, shot out at a fraction of light speed. It didn't explode. It punched straight through the raider ship's midsection, tearing through engines, reactors, and crew quarters in a line of pure kinetic devastation. The raider vessel simply came apart, scattering into 2 large, dead chunks and a cloud of fragments. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Vio R watched, stunned. There was no elegance, no art to the kill. It was brutal, mechanical, and shockingly efficient. The humans hadn't tried to win a duel. They had performed a demolition. The raider swarm, enraged by the loss, shifted their attention. 3 larger ships turned their guns on the Endeavor. Plasma fire splashed against the human ship's hull. Armor plates glowed red-hot and melted. Alarms blared. "Section C7 breached," Su Min called out, her hands flying over damaged control screens. Sealing pressure doors. Redirecting coolant to starboard heat sinks. They're focusing fire. Our armor won't hold. Ji-hoon's face was set in concentration. He wasn't a warrior. He was a problem solver. Then we don't let them focus. Tae-seok, target the lead ship's sensor clusters with point defense lasers. Blind it. Yuna, feed their comms a burst of high-intensity static on all their command frequencies. Zoom in. On my signal, give me everything we have left in the port thrusters. The Endeavour began to move, not away, but into the debris field. It was a terrifying gambit. The human ship, already damaged, weaved between chunks of wreckage, using them as cover. The point defense lasers, designed to shoot down missiles, stitched a line of fire across the lead raider's sensory arrays, temporarily blinding it. The comms static caused a moment of disarray in the swarm's chaotic coordination. Now, zoom in. The port thrusters fired at 120% capacity. The Endeavour lurched violently, scraping its belly against a large piece of a ship's keel with a shriek of tearing metal. It was a calculated sacrifice. The maneuver put a massive wall of debris between them and two of the pursuing raiders. One raider ship, too committed to its attack run, couldn't pull up in time. It slammed into the wreckage at full speed, erupting in a silent fireball. The Endeavour emerged from the other side of the debris, trailing atmosphere and molten metal. It was hurt, but it was still flying. The remaining raiders, seeing two of their own destroyed, not by superior firepower, but by the humans' willingness to use the environment and take damage, hesitated. This was not a fight they understood. The Imperial fleet, seeing the opening, pressed their advantage. Their precise energy fire picked off the distracted raiders. Within minutes, the remaining pirates broke off. Scattering back into the dark drift, silence returned to the Endeavour's command deck, broken only by the crackle of damaged systems and the hiss of a ruptured pipe. The crew was already moving. "Damage report," Ji-hoon said. His voice still even. Su-min was already coordinating repair teams. "Breaches on decks 3 and 5. Contained. Primary power is stable, but we're running on backups. Railgun capacitor is fried. We lost a lot of outer hull." "She's hurt, Captain, but she's alive." Tae-seok was applying a sealant patch to a sparking console. "No crew casualties. Some minor burns and lacerations in engineering. Med bay is ready." Yuna looked at her scans. "The Imperial ships are forming up again. They're not approaching. They're just watching us." On the view screen, the 4 golden ships held position. They were pristine, unmarked. The Endeavour sat among the wreckage, bleeding air and heat, a battered, ugly thing that had just fought a swarm of pirates with the grim practicality of a brawler in a back alley dot in the Imperial Command Center. Admiral Veyor watched the human ship begin its emergency repairs. He saw the crew moving with methodical speed. No panic, just the next task. They had taken damage that would have crippled an Imperial frigate's morale, and they were treating it like a leaky pipe. Scholar Ilara spoke quietly, her voice full of awe and horror. "They did not fight to win glory, Admiral. They fought to survive. They used the battlefield as a tool. They sacrificed their own ship's integrity as a tactic. They are like a living organism that would chew off its own limb to escape a trap." Vo nodded slowly. The test was over. The hypothesis was confirmed in the most visceral way possible. These humans were not just mentally prepared for horror. Their entire technological philosophy was born from it. Their ship wasn't designed to look impressive. It was designed to be hard to kill, to take a beating, lose pieces, and keep going. He opened a channel to the Endeavour. His voice, when it came, had lost its earlier condescension. It was flat, respectful, and deeply wary. "Captain Ji-hoon, your performance was noted. The threat is neutralized. Do you require assistance?" On the Endeavour, Ji-hoon, wiping a smudge of soot from his face, looked at the message. He keyed the response. "Thank you, Admiral. No assistance required. We have the situation under control. Just some minor hull repairs. We'll be ready to resume the transit shortly." He said it like a man who had just changed a flat tire, not survived a battle. Admiral VOR leaned back in his chair, the image of the scarred, resilient human ship. The summons this time was to a place of judgment. Not the Admiral's personal chamber, but the grand conclave of vast, circular amphitheater aboard the Illyrian flagship, designed for tribunals and diplomatic hearings. Captain Ji-hoon went, accompanied this time by Yuna. The air in the shuttle felt heavier. They were led not by soldiers, but by silent functionaries in gray robes. The conclave chamber took Yuna's breath away. For a second its ceiling was a perfect hologram of the Milky Way, and the seats rose in tiers of polished stone. But Ji-hoon simply noted the single, narrow entrance, the lack of cover, and the fact they were being led to a lone podium in the center. A place for the accused to stand alone. Admiral VOR sat in a raised seat among a panel of a dozen other high-ranking Illyrians, their faces stern. Scholar Elara stood at a data terminal to the side, her eyes fixed on the humans. Captain Ji-hoon, VOR began, his voice echoing in the quiet space. You stand before the celestial panel of inquiry. Your vessel's actions, its design, and your species' demeanor have raised profound questions. You will provide final clarification. Ji-hoon stood straight, hands clasped behind his back. Yuna stood slightly behind him, her sharp eyes recording every detail of the panel's body language. We will answer what we can, Ji-hoon said. A different admiral, an older one with a face like etched crystal, spoke. You fight with a brutality that has no honor. You sacrifice your own ship's integrity. You show no reverence for the art of war. This suggests a history of limitless, desperate conflict. Are you refugees from a fallen empire? Survivors of a cosmic cataclysm? Ji-hoon shook his head. No, we are explorers from Earth. Our history has conflict, yes. But we are not running from anything. Scholar Elara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the doubt. Then explain the disconnect. Your technical readouts show a civilization of perhaps Tier 3 capability. Yet your psychological and strategic profile is that of a Tier 7 species that has weathered galactic storms. Your captain spoke of facing self-replicating swarms and extra-dimensional incursions as theoretical training tools. Your ship is a monument to paranoia. You cannot be both simple and profoundly weathered. Which is it? There it was. The core of the misunderstanding laid bare. Yuna saw it first. The entire Imperial logic was based on a false choice. They believed calm in the face of splendor could only come from having seen worse realities. The idea that it could come from simply imagining them and then building accordingly was alien to their philosophy. Ji-hoon took a slow breath. He looked from the stern admirals to the curious scholar. He decided on the pure, simple engineering truth. You have misunderstood, he said, his voice clear in the vast room. We are not unimpressed because we have seen worse things. We are unimpressed because we have imagined worse things. A ripple of confusion went through the panel. We look at your perfect empire, Ji-hoon continued, gesturing vaguely to the magnificent chamber, and we see a finished product. It is beautiful. It is complete. Humanity is never finished. We are always building, always testing, always breaking things to see how they work, and then patching them back together, stronger where they broke. He pointed towards the viewport, where the scarred, patched hull of the Endeavor was visible, dwarfed by the Golden Fleet. Our ship looks like that because we are always improving it. We found a weak point in the radiation shielding, so we added a layer of composite. The starboard sensor array was too slow, so we bolted on a faster one from a newer model. It is ugly because it is alive. It is a process, not a monument. Admiral VO leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. The pirates. You took severe damage. You used the debris field as a weapon. This is not the action of an explorer. It is the action of a problem solver, Una spoke up, her voice firm. The problem was eliminate the threat to our survival. The available tools were our ship, the environment, and the enemy's predictable aggression. We used all three. Efficiency, not honor, was the goal. We were not calm. We were focused. It was a complex system that needed immediate correction. Scholar Ilara's eyes were wide. You are saying your resilience is not born of past trauma, but of a perpetual forward-looking anxiety? You invent horrors to prepare for them? We call it contingency planning, Ji-hoon said with a small shrug. We imagine failure so we can design against it. Our paranoia, as you call it, is just another tool. Like a wrench. He thought of Su-min. It is not that we have faced planet-eating machines. It is that we considered the idea of them and decided to build our reactors with a little extra shielding, just in case. The difference is important. The silence in the Grand Conclave was absolute. The admirals looked at each other. The foundational assumption of the entire Illyrian Empire was that peace, order, and beauty were the ultimate achievements, the end goals of a mature species. These humans saw them not as goals, but as states fragile, temporary states that required endless maintenance against a universe they assumed was inherently chaotic and hostile. They weren't warriors from a tragic past. They were engineers from a relentless, unfinished, and perpetually preparing future. The oldest admiral finally spoke, his voice thin with a new kind of unease. So you are not veterans. You are mechanics. Of your own destiny. Yes, Ji-hoon said simply. And if we granted you the schematics to our finest engines, the admiral pressed, what would you do? Ji-hoon didn't hesitate. Take them apart. See what makes them work. Test them to failure. Then try to improve the power output by 15%, even if it made them louder and uglier. And then we would share those improvements with you, in case you found them useful. A soft, collective exhale came from the panel. The statement was not a threat. It was, in its own way, a generous offer. But it was also a vision of a universe where nothing was sacred, nothing was final, and everything was a prototype. It was the most subversive idea they had ever encountered. Admiral Veoar stood. The grand proceedings were over. The mystery was solved, and the answer was more unsettling than any tale of ancient wars. Captain Ji-hoon, Veoar said, his formal tone replaced by something weary and direct. The Illyrian Empire will provide you with corrected astral charts to navigate back to your remote sector. Your vessel, while not in violation of any statutes we recognize, is a destabilizing presence. Not because it is warlike, but because it is unfinished. It suggests a universe where perfection is not the answer. Adaptation is. He took a final look at the Endeavor on the viewport. You are free to go. We will not hinder you, and we will not follow. It was not a statement of dismissal, but of self-preservation. The return to the Endeavor was quiet. On the shuttle, Una finally let out a long breath. They're afraid of us. Not because we're strong, but because we're messy. Ji-hoon nodded, looking out at the stars. They think we'll break their beautiful things just to see how to put them back together better. And they're right. We would. Back on their own command deck, the crew gathered. Su-min reported the repairs were holding, for now. Tae-seok was excitedly cataloging the limited biological data he'd gleaned from the Imperial biosigns. So what's the verdict? Su-min asked, leaning against a battered console. We're being given a map home and shown the door, Ji-hoon said. They find us philosophically disruptive. Una smiled faintly. They built a ceiling to look at the galaxy. We'd rather just go outside, even if it means getting the hull dented. As the Endeavor, under its own power once more, turned away from the gleaming Imperial fleet, the crew saw something new on the long-range scanners. At the very edge of Imperial space, where the stars grew thin, there were signatures of new construction. Not the clean, golden stations of the Illyrians, but something else modular, practical, and expanding rapidly. It was a frontier outpost, but it didn't look like an empire's. "It seems," Taesiok said, "we aren't the only ones who don't fit in with the perfect order." On the Resplendent, Admiral Vor watched the ugly human ship vanish into the warp. He did not feel victorious. He felt like a man who had just seen a crack in the foundation of his world. Scholar Alara approached, her data slate in hand. "Their path is clear, Admiral. They are returning to the unmapped voids. They are returning to the workshop," Aor corrected softly. He looked at the holographic star map, so perfect and still. Then he looked at the rough, growing signatures on the Frin, the outpost of other unfinished species, perhaps. They will keep building, keep testing, keep breaking and fixing. And one day, their kind of resilient, ugly, practical reality will knock on our door again. Not with a declaration of war, but with an offer to improve our engines. He turned away from the viewport, the image of the patched hull imprinted on his mind. The human ship was not a weapon. It was a question. A question his perfect empire did not yet have an answer for.